Hey everybody. Um, just doing the normal again. Usually this would be on a Friday, but I can't tomorrow. Uh, all day is full, so I'm doing this on Thursday. Hopefully next week we'll get back to a little bit more of the regular schedule with the Monday mini primer and the Friday news roundup. As always, super chat Q&A. Check this out. Soon to be released TMBS hoodie. It's not the best shot. There'll be a whole store set up and everything like that. Thank you, Francis. Um, as always, I would say subscribe to us on Patreon. Michael Brooks Show on Patreon, patreon.com/TMBS. That's how you get the whole experience. Awesome. Can't wait to see you in Philly. I'm honored. Yeah, they will be available soon and other things as well. I'm really excited that we're finally getting the TMBS shop going. 3-to-1 extra content as a patron. We crossed our first 3,000 patrons, which is incredibly exciting and solidifies everything we're doing. And I'm incredibly stoked. So join us, become a patron. And then during this conversation, you hit me with a super chat. I will answer your questions. Hit the bell so you get notifications before the live stream. The Zizek interview right now and for the next little while is going to be available for patrons, and then we will release it. I'm not sure what the timeline is. Man, that interview was amazing. Between the interviews with Slavoj Zizek and Adolf Reed Jr., I mean, I'm feeling more encouraged and more optimistic about intellectualism. I see that. So, just a couple of things I wanted to sort of touch on briefly in the news. Yeah, the Zizek interview was amazing, as was the Reed interview. I do have an incredible amount of zeal for the Bernie Sanders agenda, and I just wanted to talk about that briefly. Tiny tips help. Talk about Julian Assange. Well, Julian Assange is the charges brought by the Trump administration against, yes, Zizek and Reed are amazing. Let me actually, yeah, this is good. I'll talk about both of these things. The charges brought by the Trump administration against Julian Assange pose a structural threat to journalism and freedom of speech everywhere. And I want to really get back to what WikiLeaks revealed in the release of documents that is specifically related to these charges. So in 2010, 2011, in that period of time, WikiLeaks was revealing mass US attacks and civilian casualties in Afghanistan. By the way, civilian casualties have been skyrocketing in Afghanistan. He was revealing corporate misconduct. He was revealing any number of really atrocious US behavior and military industrial complex overseas. The charges related to the Chelsea Manning revelations, if they are carried through, and even just the charges themselves, are a structural threat to journalism everywhere. Bernie Sanders has put out a powerful whistleblower program. Like with everything else, he's ahead, head and shoulders above everybody else in terms of the Democratic candidates. But we do need to be very clear about fighting against the charges against Julian Assange. Also, I mentioned this the other day on the stream. I tweeted about it. The arrest of Max Blumenthal is also a serious threat to journalism and free expression and adversarial press, and providing the fullest set of views we need on U.S. regime change efforts in Venezuela. We're going up to the deadline tonight for the next Bernie Sanders fundraising. numbers. I'd encourage you, if you can and you haven't yet, to go over there and donate. The momentum is real. The power, the momentum of this is incredibly significant. Those squad endorsements have translated to real gains in the polls, particularly in Nevada, but also a great poll showing Bernie leading in New Hampshire. And this is always the time to remember, hey, that these are basically, without a doubt, subversive. These numbers are still in a context where the theory of the Sanders campaign is not predicated on the traditional polling arguments, right? So that harnessing an entirely new base, building a new electorate like that is something dynamic and new and something that won't show up in the traditional polling. And the traditional polling is going well. And I think more and more people are recognizing that it is just full on political warfare, right? Like, there is never, MSNBC, CNN are going to be trash. They're going to be corporate. They're going to be biased against Sanders. They're going to be biased against workers' rights, labor, progress, and any structural approach to change in this country for anything. And I think the Sanders campaign needs to lean into that and embrace it. And I also think that this is, very reflective of this new millennial polling on how millennials think of socialism, which is, fascinating. I mean, basically, if you look at it, from everywhere from strong to moderate support from a socialist presidential candidate, you're talking about 70% of millennials with a positive view of socialism. And I think part of this is, thank you. I loved the Zizek interview. I really recommend, if you haven't yet, go become a patron and check it out. I think both the Zizek and Adolph Reed Jr. interviews are just such incredible roadmaps. I'm really proud of them. Hit me with your super chat questions as well. I mean, the super chats are really helping because definitely YouTube is, getting really bad for independent and left media creators. They sort of built up all this extremist content, and now a part of their correction is trying to sort of incentivize corporate news like every other platform. So we need to be on YouTube. It's incredibly important. Basically the super chats just kind of help shore everything up. We are definitely getting revenue and we're growing and we're good. But we were really starting to pop, and I wanted to do this extra content anyways on YouTube, but the algorithm, and I think it'll be interesting when we hit 100,000 subscribers. I wonder if that will change. Honestly, you, Sam, and the crew are often what get me through the day without wanting to scream so loud that I pop a blood vessel. Thank you. That's really sweet of you to say, and I'm honored by that we're able to contribute. Wait, Michael, you are the best, brother. I've been homeless for a minute out here in Los Angeles, social, born and raised. When I get Wi-Fi, I love your stuff. Keith, I'm so honored. Yes, donate to Bernie. Indeed. If you can, if you have that ability and you haven't yet, go over there tonight and make sure you donate to Bernie before the 12 o'clock deadline. I've experienced homelessness briefly in my life as well, mostly when I was growing up, but at certain points, very briefly in adulthood. I don't want to in any way exaggerate, but it's really hard. And you got to know, and it's true, that people are there, people care about you, and we really literally are all in this together. There is a real depth and truth to that ethos. That's why that slogan, "I'm willing to fight for somebody who doesn't look like me," is taking on. There's an actual truth to that, and it's the opposite of saccharine. It's substantive. It's in the mess of life. Those millennial numbers on socialism are very encouraging, and I think that they offer a platform upon which we can keep making more and more deep and structural arguments about, as an example, democratizing the commanding heights of the economy, all businesses having to do with the commons, whether it be in vast areas of technology, certainly in energy, in other areas. That needs to be under public democratic control. Um, we need to decommodify healthcare and housing. The ground base of socialism is primarily, obviously, due to Bernie Sanders articulating a broad message of decency and justice, but also through, frankly, the right throwing the term around out, even for center right leaders by Barack Obama, like Barack Obama. They totally lost all meaning of the word. You've probably gone over this a million times, but how did you meet Sam and got on the majority report? Good show. Good shows all week, Mike. Just showing my support. You're the man. I love you. Trans rights, seize the means, Lula Libre. Love you back. The state security apparatus always claim whistleblowers have blood on their hands. Meanwhile, 400,000 people die a year because of lack of 40,000 people die a year because of lack of health insurance. Absolutely. I met Sam in, I believe, 2010. I was actually introduced to him through David Pakman, funnily enough. And Sam and I had drinks. I had no idea what I was going to do at that time. I did go to Bates and I studied in Turkey and I had a degree in international relations. I ran an arts nonprofit. I taught meditation. I did some brand strategy and research work. I was unemployed for a while. I bounced around, did a bunch of different things. I couch surf. It was at times really interesting, really rewarding. At other times, absolutely dealing with failure, depression, all that sort of thing. And I met Sam, and basically he needed a producer, and that producer role transformed into basically an on-air role, and things grew from there. That's how it happened. Sam did, it's so funny. My kind of emergence as like a personality happened through being on the show. That wasn't like the initial sort of premise of why I'd be hired, in a way, which is kind of funny. People said it was related to Sam through marriage. Well, that's definitely not true. And of course, the sea change for me has been launching TMBS 2 years ago, and just being so honored and humbled by the success of it, and amazed by the community and the international bonds that we're building out of. So yeah, I think besides that, yeah, we might do some type of meditation instruction thing, actually. I want to do something with my teacher, Joseph Goldstein. See you in Philly in November. What's right-wing Mandela's opinion on Chile? You have a lot of people in Chile, because of the weather, that have very bad work ethics. And the trouble is, because they will not work hard, they are protesting. And that is what we are struggling against, those of us who have work ethics. What about a Bernie Corbyn summit? I think that would be cool. And I think Bernie should make some trips overseas. Crystal Ball and I talked about this several months ago. I think it would be project something about the state of his and nature of his campaign that would really be enhancing and powerful. And I think Bernie should make an overseas trip. I really do. Another thing that I wanted to touch on, and I did in depth on the show, we'll be releasing a video on the latest revelations on the real potential depth of the connection between Jair Bolsonaro and the assassination of Marielle Franco. Left is best. That is incredibly important. The notion, the idea, the reporting that one of the guys who actually pulled the trigger on the assassination of Marielle went to Bolsonaro's house the day of, and that Bolsonaro, in fact, might have actually been being dishonest. He might have been in Rio at the time, not, as he said, in Congress taking votes. And then the fact that it led to him having this incredible, embarrassing breakdown on television. He's having like a full meltdown. It's very interesting, right? Trump is the quintessential clown fascist, and he's hilarious and he's funny. He has a bizarre charisma. He's incredibly corrupt. Donate to Andy Bashir for Kentucky governor, Greg Stumpo for AG running against Mitch McConnell's lawyer, and laid the groundwork for getting rid of Mitch in 2020. See you in Philly. Thanks for hearing me out on Lebanon. Of course, he called the hit. It's possible. So, Trump has this dynamic. Then you have guys like Erdogan, especially, but also Modi, who are disgusting. And they are for real thugs. I mean, these are like effective. Putin, Netanyahu in many respects, Duterte, Duterte is certainly an eccentric. Thoughts on Ilhan's questionable vote on Turkey. But then, in Bolsonaro's case, he's just a total mess. Lula had a hilarious line in his latest interview. The interviewer came in, and Lula said, "You can ask me anything, and I won't be like Bolsonaro was the other night on Facebook." Bolsonaro was the other night. Thoughts on Ilhan's questionable vote on Turkey. Happy spooky Bernie on Days of Samaro tonight. Shout out to Deadspin, a real one, y'all. I respect your international reporting. Well, I'm honored by that. I have a piece coming out tomorrow with Jean Bajlan in Jacobin on Ilhan Omar and Turkey. Here's the bottom line. Ilhan Omar, obviously, I have a huge amount of respect for. And she has been an incredible leader in, thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Pete. She has been, and yes, I'm sorry, that's right. Sergio Moro has been terrorizing the doorman into reversing his testimony because Sergio Moro, the politically motivated, corrupt, disgusting judge who put Lula in jail, is obviously, and always will and always has, will cover up for the Bolsonaro regime. And Michael, have you read Stratton Lynn's work? I have not. I don't know who that is, but I'm obviously always open to learning. But it'll be more in the piece. The bottom line is that Ilhan Omar, there's a political connection and a soft thoughts on Trump attacking Jeremy Corbyn and floating the idea of a Johnson-Farage alliance could be a big boon, best from the UK. The more Donald Trump talks about the UK election, the better it is for the Labour Party. And I just pray, don't fuck around with the Lib Dems. My God, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell have so much to offer. Oh, hey, so Australia is going full fascist, so I'm probably going to have to kick up a notch with the channel in the next election campaign. It's hectic, MB. I'm really afraid. Everybody, check out What Do You Mean? It's an incredible channel. And yes, things clearly are seriously escalating in Australia. There's also a really important China dimension, and we will definitely be covering that more. But I just want to say, Jordan Peterson says that postmodern neo-Marxists apply the power dynamic of oppression to identities beyond class. So incels and libertarians are Marxist. I don't exactly follow that. What I was saying, so basically, Turkey has used a lot of soft power in places like Somalia and built relationships. And just like any other, constituency, if you represent a district that has a lot of people from Ukraine or Jamaica or anywhere, there might be that overlap with how you vote and how you would love to have Michael Tracy on your show. Love from Maine. Thanks for all your efforts. You're greatly appreciated. Thank you, Cameron. So that's sort of the dynamic with Ilhan. Now, there is a political context for this. Now, ironically, what that puts her in a position of being like, and we'll explain a lot more of this in the article, is that it's like progressive except Palestine. I mean, there's been countless left leaders or liberals, some of whom have had really good foreign policy instincts, who Israel can do whatever it wants. Israel can run an apartheid state. Israel can kill as many civilians as it doesn't matter. Israel anywhere, anytime, any place. Now, Ilhan has not been quite as extreme in her rhetoric with Turkey, but her voting record on these two votes, both on the sanctions, which, by the way, these are targeted sanctions, not general population sanctions, which I always oppose. And her present vote and her just ridiculous statement defending it, I mean, these are big mistakes, no doubt. Now, there's a politics behind it, which we should be understanding and mature about, and she's a politician like any other. However, I mean, part of the irony here is that because of her courage and because of her clarity, she's really raised the bar here. So obviously, it's unacceptable, and we have to work on it. AOC endorsed Jessica Cisneros. I think it would be really helpful to not the Squads and Birdie endorsements to further the agenda. To not them? I don't. Okay, I don't. I'm not familiar with that, but I think that everybody should be supporting the left candidates they can support. Period. And the most important endorsement, obviously, for all these people for the real agenda is supporting Bernie. The news out of Latin America is really interesting. The elections, I'm glad the way they went the ways they did in Uruguay, Bolivia, and Argentina. This global movement, and I'd recommend you look at the conversation. You look at the conversation. Oh no, thank you. Got you, Jose. Word. And I will talk about that more. Didn't you guys check out the conversation I had with Crystal and Sagar this morning on the Hill about the global workers' anti-neoliberalism uprisings and how the media has been completely asleep? So I think that, thanks, man. I think that this is so important. You are seeing a globalized wave from Haiti to Lebanon that was in Sudan, Iraq, Ecuador, and in some ways, really the epicenter is Chile because of that through line on neoliberalism. And definitely watch the video of me and Harvey. That chant in Chile that neoliberalism was born here and will die here is haunting. And it's so illustrative, too, of all of the myths and lies that we've been told about capitalism and quote unquote free markets, that free markets are these loose, non-restrictive things, when in reality, they're highly bureaucratic, highly regimented, highly coordinated. And in a place like Chile, paved by the CIA backing a fascist Pinochet regime that murdered thousands and thousands of people from all walks of life, and then flew in the freedom-loving Chicago boys. I mean, in many respects, September 11th, 1973 in Chile tells us many of the key lessons of the modern world, and that uprising is elemental to reversing it. I'm very excited. The pre-stream on Tuesday at 6 will be with Kim Ives from Haiti Liberté. The dynamism and courage of what you're seeing in Haiti right now is extraordinary. And I'd recommend definitely going into the archive on the YouTube channel to look at our coverage on Haiti, including conversations with Francois and Kim Ives. Any other questions, guys, on the super chat? As I say, definitely become Anthony from San Juan was hilarious. The whole episode was hilarious. Yes. On Majority Report, it was a fucking great Ken Day. There's no doubt about it. I talked about Blumenthal in the beginning of the episode, but I have to say, it's a super chat thing, and just spamming one name is not the strategy. But I will say again, Max Blumenthal, the arrest of Max Blumenthal is terrifying, and we need to condemn it, speak against it, and it's in a basket. Look, I mean, Chelsea Manning is still being hounded for revealing war crimes. The charges against Julian Assange are a structural threat to journalism and liberty everywhere. In fact, actually, Zizek and I got into a little bit of this conversation. Any other super chat questions? Regardless of what you think, I absolutely have disagreements with Max on certain areas, for sure. It's irrelevant, totally irrelevant. Have you looked into the SRA Socialist Rifle Association yet? Not yet. I will try to soon. I promise. I appreciate your content. Left is best, Bernie or else. I love it. My 18-year-old son encountered Kurdish peaceful protests in Germany while exploring the country. Paul's I advised not to speak English on the streets. Why does no one I know even know about the situation? The situation in Rojava? Well, in some ways, because it gets such limited coverage, and I mean, it's like, and when it's covered, it's always covered through a U.S. hegemonic or geostrategic lens, and not the innate power, success, and extraordinary dynamism of the YPG Kurdish experiment, which we should all be in solidarity with. And then also the broader US story. I mean, look, the United States was bullying and threatening the Kurds to not cut a deal with Assad while they were lying that they would stay there and protect the Kurds from Turkish aggression. Of course, the Kurds needed to cut a deal with Assad. And that's a whole other, truly despicable, disgusting part of that whole saga. Democracy is under threat. That is the big picture. That's the big conversation. And you certainly see that in Australia as well. I mean, you had state security officials several months ago going into the Australian Public Broadcasting Corporation, again, because of reporting on Australian troops' roles in civilian casualties. Larry Krasner endorsing Warren is disappointing. It's beyond disappointing. I mean, look, on one hand, you have to have the maturity to recognize that, a Barbara Lee is an extraordinary leader, a great congresswoman. I mean, the courage she showed in voting, being the only single person in Congress, House and Senate, to vote against an authorization of military force after the September 11th terrorist attacks, weeks within that. That's a Wolf Alice Preacher songs. I don't know what that is, but I will say it. That is extraordinary. And it sucks that she endorsed Kamala Harris. And yes, in fact, there's a lot of ways it makes sense, but you know what? It is. Barbara, she's an extraordinary, progressive and left congresswoman. And so it was, and Harris is obviously not the left candidate. And similarly with Krasner, I mean, there could be different political calculations. Maybe he doesn't want to run further afoul of the Pennsylvania establishment, but he had the opportunity with the person with by far the most aggressive, transformative criminal justice reform plan. That's Bernie Sanders, and he didn't come through. So look, he still does good work. We still should be allied with him in certain ways, of course. But yeah, it's a stupid, ridiculous, and non-committed endorsement. Highlight of my day was watching you and Stram struggle to laugh for 5 minutes after John from San Antonio dropped his Pelosi nickname. Well, that was Raygun, but that was hilarious. Michael, your best style was right after you went to Jamaica or PR or where it was. My best style. What was I wearing? Oh, I was wearing, a lot of the pink shirts, blue blazer thing. That's coming back. Don't worry about it. In fact, that is probably going to be the attire on the next show. Dude, keep up the great work, but why isn't there a TMBS trademark tracksuit ELS? Let us share in your style as a sleazy Eastern European gangster. We're literally working on one. 2020 election results, how trustworthy will they be? I don't think so. I think just keep your eye on the ball in terms of fighting for election transparency and working for Bernie Sanders. I think kind of that type, unless a hypothetical like that helps constructive action, I'm not sure how good it is to worry about it. Thanks, Michael. Endless gratitude for helping us. Thank you. And please, everybody, check out What Do You Mean? Bernie getting endorsements is good. What can we do to get Bernie to endorse more local progressives himself? I think we could tweet at him and ask him. I mean, that's something he has to be really careful about in terms of vetting. Please explain Adidas aesthetics. Please explain the Adidas aesthetics of lefties. Well, some of us lefties have extraordinary taste and athletic ability. Guarantee Dave Rubin handed out pictures of his books for Halloween. Oh, without a doubt. Will Yang and Tulsi cost Bernie in the primary? Not if we don't let them. I mean, honestly, I think at this point, I'm kind of increasingly convinced that if people are sort of on those ships, they're not really Sanders voters anyways. They're kind of doing different things. I think it's obvious. Look, I think it's important to debunk and, explain the problems with Elizabeth Warren. Explain the problems and debunk Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, Pete Buttigieg. Look, everybody besides Bernie Sanders is a joker. Sorry, compared to him. There is a unprecedented modern political option. That's Bernie Sanders. So let's not bullshit. And we'll keep making that case and being clear about it. But, I don't know. On the other hand, I mean, I'm sure there's some people that are fucking around with those candidates who would probably be with Sanders anyways. And, and also some people, I guess, just haven't been educated yet. And, that's obviously our job. Thoughts on Howie Hawkins, Green Party candidate? I mean, Howie's cool. I've known about Howie for a long time. I think there has been some New York elections where I've probably casted a protest vote for him. I think the Green Party is not, I think that that's just not a useful or strategic vehicle in the United States at all. So I'm not, and I think especially now, I mean, now there really is some opportunity, and especially, to take advantage, like the apparatus of the Democratic Party is a problem for sure, but it's interesting, like the ultimate problem is capital, right? Like that is the problem. And all of these other things, whether it's the Democratic Party establishment or corporate money or all that, this is subsidiary problems of capitalism. And in other respects, the Democratic Party there's a lot of institutional openness in certain areas. It's very institutionally weak. I mean, people can get a lot of power in local and state parties. People are running for Congress, and some people are getting elected, genuinely bringing new things to the table. So that's where the energy is now. Interesting convo with Sagar and Jenny. Radical, different political worldviews. What place does right-wing politics have in the world want to build, if any? I mean, it depends how you define right-wing politics. I think there's some things that get defined as right-wing, which is, which is disastrous. All of us should be interested in strong community, continuity, even healthy aspects of tradition, as long as, of course, we're uprooting and destroying every form of xenophobia and bigotry and so on, obviously. And I think, in any political system that's open and dynamic, there's always going to be a right and left, and, and people are going to have disputes and disagreements. Ruben has a degree in poli-sci. That's absolutely hilarious. But I mean, the bottom line is, I think, does Tim Pool get any ink in the upcoming book? He actually doesn't. He wasn't really on my radar, to be honest. And he still kind of isn't. In the modern context, I mean, first of all, Sagar's an incredibly smart guy and a really nice guy and a cool guy. And there is, I think, actual value, especially in this space, if you can have interesting, dynamic, and constructive disagreements with people. That's actually really important, because very little that exists, and the rhetoric of that has been so distorted by kind of IDW bullshit. So, I mean, that's really the bottom line. I like Sagar, and I learn a lot talking from him. And I think a disagreement that isn't like some, sort of pedantry thing, or, just kind of bickering, which I could be as guilty of as anybody, but I just don't want to do that. But we have some interesting overlaps, because we do. I mean, actually, Sagar has a strong critique of neoliberalism. And we can get to interesting places. That's constructive for people. I mean, ultimately, in my world, obviously, the pendulum has moved significantly to what I would deem to be the left in an ideal long-term world. Thoughts on how Jeremy Corbyn and Labour will do in the UK election in December? I think they have a real fighting chance. And honestly, like, this is the phase in such a short period of time where I would say just get out there. If I was in the UK, I would be doing every single thing I could to drum up the vote for Jeremy Corbyn, John McDonnell, and fighting back against all the relentless bullshit and nonsense that comes their way. Any good spooky movies I should watch tonight? I don't watch spooky movies, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm much more of a gangster movie guy. Mehdi Hassan dropped the podcast with Chomsky today. If you listen, can you please try to have him on your show, The Majority Report? I will look to have Chomsky on TMBS for sure. And of course, I'd actually really love to talk with Chomsky about Lula Livre. My dude, can you explain why Jank is wasting time arguing for Warren? I love the guy, but what the fuck? Check out Dom Kennedy's earlier mixed tapes. Guys, it's really tricky because first of all, just honestly, I don't I try to watch as much content as I can. I don't watch a lot of sort of similar shows in some ways, because part of what I do in my show with so much of the international coverage is I'm watching other things. but of course, I know, and I saw actually the great debate between a really, really good segment with Anna and Cenk on healthcare and Warren. And of course, I agree with Anna. One, Anna's a really good friend. She's totally brilliant. You should watch all of her stuff. And also because Anna is like, I think she's right. I think she's basically the only person in the game who's read all of Bernie's healthcare plan. She speaks with more authority on it than anybody, pontificating in these circles. I think that there is a lot of folks who um, remember some really great roles that Warren played in certain really specific struggles in the Obama era. They might even have just, in fact, different politics to some extent. I will say, I think Cenk, has also been, I think he's also very good to Bernie. I think he's comes from a genuine place, and I'm not trying to spin it, but it's like, I can't tell you what I can tell you what my disagreements are, right? Like, I disagree probably with Sam. I think with Cenk. I think with Ryan Grant. Like, I don't trust Warren's trajectory on healthcare. Healthcare. I think there's enough equivocating, and I think that Bernie wrote, just even playing into the idea that Bernie didn't write a bill that is workable and strategic, is undermining the effort. So I'll tell you what I think. I can't tell you, why somebody thinks what they think. Particularly obviously somebody that I also like and respect, like Cenk. Everyone in PA vote no on Tuesday's ballot question regarding Maisie's Law, aka Crime Victim Amendment. Shout out to Kelsey Glammer appearing on all the ads. It's easier for voters to spot garbage. I don't know anything about that. Catch Sam Harris's defense of Tucker and Ingram. Oh God, I have not seen that, but I believe that. There is definitely a chapter on Sam Harris in my book. You guys, which two titles? The book is coming out in February. Against the Web, the globalist socialist answer to the new right, or the history is irrelevant, ? The globalist socialist answer to the new right. I'm curious. Still playing with titles. This book is actually really good. I'm really excited about the book. And I'm very excited. All right, yeah, the first one. Against the Web. I like Against the Web. Well, the second part is what it is. I mean, the second part is all of this. That's like the TMBS mission. Also, Cosmopolitan. Well, yeah, probably we'll stick with Cosmopolitan. I think Globalist is funny, but we'll stick with Cosmopolitan. If elected, Bernie needs to purge the Democratic Party. Bernie needs to be aggressive as hell if he gets elected. Hey, Michael, would you consider doing a D&D tabletop stream with the majority report for fun to have something? Thank you for your work, man. I don't know what that means. A D&D tabletop. What is Bernie's perspective on NATO? I don't know Bernie's perspective on NATO. I do know that with people like Matt Duss, there is a actual movement towards rethinking U.S. hegemony and imperial order. Now, sometimes Bernie sounds like any other Democrat in terms of restoring normalcy and so on. And I would say if you're being real and you actually want a policy prescription, like Daniel Bessner talks about, to actually dismantle U.S. Hegemony, I'll go on Jesse Lee Peterson's show for 4,000 patrons. In fact, bank it. When we hit 4,000 patrons, I will go on the Jesse Lee Peterson show if they will have me. But as far as manufacturing ideas, I like that. As far as NATO has always been a tool of U.S. imperialism. As far, though, as beginning the actual steps of reevaluating U.S. foreign policy, from cutting military spending to talking forthrightly about the military-industrial complex to, even having a notion of self-determination for people in the Middle East or Latin America or the Caribbean, to having solidarity with the movements in Ecuador, with Chile, with Lula Libre. That is the first of a long journey for dismantling. So, of course, Bernie has bad votes on foreign policy. Of course, there are areas that aren't thought out. Of course, there's also areas that are actually genuinely complicated. But if you want any actual move towards a reset, that's the one campaign that's doing it, period. Any other super chat questions, guys? Definitely go become a patron. When we hit 4,000 patrons, I'll go on the Jesse Lee Peterson show. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thoughts on who will be next to suspend their campaign, and why the hell is Pete Buttigieg even in the race? Well, Pete Buttigieg is in the race because he's a corporate Trojan horse, and he will be funded by some of the worst and most pernicious elements in America, and he's entitled. Who will drop out next? Oh, that's really hard to say, but I feel like, Beto, man. Although I don't know what the incentive is to officially drop out. That's hard as hell. Maybe Beto because the media won't be gassing him as much, but I really don't know. George Gaze versus Kevin Campbell, footage of Kamala, deputy prosecutor, keeping George in prison for a 70-year sentence. Kamala could have released him. Shake my head. Her record on that stuff is disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. As an Iranian American, I've come to realize that most older Iranians have reactionary pro-Republican politics. How can I sell them on left ideas? I've actually noticed that in some of my experience too, but you would have to tell me, man. I don't know. Any good book on the pink tide? I'll get back to you on that. I've done so much more long form article reading, and that's a really good question. It's a very, very sympathetic one several years ago that was current, so it doesn't have you the kind of same historical overview, but great and readable. There was one, I think it was called I think it might have even been literally like Pirates of the Caribbean by Tariq Ali, the prominent Pakistani British leftist. If Bernie fails, do you think it would ever be beneficial for socialists to create their own federal party? Nah, sure, but the structural barriers to creating a federal third party are just not, there's much better uses of radical and insurrectionary, and I would actually say, frankly, in that realm, then I would actually gravitate towards non-electoral work, frankly. Or, frankly, the work of just let's radically reform, and I'm talking radical reform of the electoral system to even get there as a possibility. But then how our government works, I don't know, man. I'm dubious. I think on certain local levels, especially because most places are functioning one party, it's a good idea. Chomsky is a great idea. Let's see if we can get to 300 in the super chat before I sign off. Tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and I'll share it later, I'm going to be on Bill Fletcher Jr.'s radio show, which I'm very excited about. Bill Fletcher Jr., another great elder on the show. We got to get Angela Davis on this show. That's on the list. And what's your Bernie VP wish list? Well, I always say, let me just say, as of today, always Nina Turner and Rashida Tlaib. Watch the video that they put out in Chicago, in Detroit. It was amazing. Is Sagar being slowly converted to a progressive? No, I think that you're just being exposed to a different and a good dude who's got a brand of conservative politics that hasn't been as prominent, and there's still really big disagreements there, right? Like there's big disagreements. But I do think for anybody who cares about working and middle class people at all, which obviously Sagar does, there's going to be a huge amount of critique of neoliberalism. What do you think about the idea that Hitchens' neoconservatism was paradoxically motivated by his Kurdish solidarity? Also love you guys. Yeah, I think it was to some extent, but so what? You know what I mean? Yes, there was absolutely, he leaned on Saddam's genocidal conduct towards the Kurds, and he spoke often on the Kurds. But the bottom line was that he was a propagandist, not only for the illegal mass murder in Iraq, and invasion, but for the whole apparatus that emerged. I mean, think of all the innocent people that have died in Afghanistan. Think of, I mean, even things that he technically, sure, opposed: the Patriot Act, the global torture regime, the axis of evil speech, which was a smack in the face to Iran that we were actually having some rapprochement with through Afghanistan. I like Hitchens a lot, in fact, but and especially if you read Alexander Coburn, who's kind of graduate level Hitchens. I mean, there are a lot of problems there. We're going to have to wait another year again to see Ken, and Ken, probably, unless I just morph into that guy because it's so fun. As an Iranian in the diaspora, unless your older relatives are anti-imperialist in some way, they're a lost cause. Most are anti-Islam and pro-Shah. Yeah, that's what I've kind of seen. There's a lot of this sort of like pro Shah zone. Guys, oh, and also get your tickets to the Philly live show at World Cafe. We are 2/3 sold out. Can President Sanders dismantle the CIA and NSA, or at least near them? He can, but the process. This is a very long process to literally dissemble the bureaucracy of the national security state military industrial complex. He can begin that process, and I believe that there is thinking and sense that he intends to. And don't forget, actually, Bernie was we talk about the wrong votes he cast. He also cast some very correct votes and was unflinching and courageous in his opposition also to the Gulf War, but also the invasion of Iraq in 2003. But people also forget he was relentless against the Patriot Act. He even spoke out on behalf of Howard Stern when Clear Channel was censoring him. So Bernie actually has a very strong civil libertarian streak, which is reflected in this incredible whistleblower protection bill that they put forward, which again, has barely gotten any attention, but it's great. Big fan. Ever consider having Serge Tankian on? Would love a convo between you and Turkey Rojava. Serious stuff. Well, first of all, thank you so much. And secondly, I do not know who that is, but I would certainly be open to learning and finding out more. Guys, if you haven't yet, come and become a patron. I'm really excited we passed 3,000. We got to hold it. Tomorrow we're going to have our, the first of the month fall off and all that bullshit. So if you are a patron, make sure that your card and information is up to date. That's really important. And then, spread the word far and wide. At 3,000, we're able to solidify and ground what we do because we've increased offerings and people's pay and things like that. So that's solidify, we say at 3,000. When we get to 4,000 and 5,000, that's when we can really start to escalate, which is the intention of the show, to keep growing and expanding it. Because I'm just so excited about this stuff, and I love the community, and I love really putting out this high quality work that I'm so proud of that we do at TMBS. So if you haven't yet, become a patron, patreon.com/TMBS. Get your tickets to the Philly live show. With $1 trillion on the line, an endless list of enemies making, would Bernie almost certainly be assassinated? I don't want to put that. Again, let's not put horrible things in the ether. Let's not do that. And also, let's fight on the real battle that we need to fight on. We need to fight the battle against media, against judicial warfare. Look, frankly, and that is look, don't send shit like that. I won't read it again. But beyond that, on the table, let's look even in places like Latin America where, it hasn't in recent years. Lula's in jail, right? Corbyn, they've tried to destroy. Bernie, they're trying to destroy. Look at those forms of political warfare. So, in fact, when we get into that really hyped up, negative, kind of fantastical place, it actually distracts us from what's right in front of our faces and we're dealing with, that we have to. Anyways, guys, I really appreciate all of you. You're awesome. I'm honored. and definitely Ecuador. You make me oh, lead singer of oh, okay, yeah. Oh wait. Well, okay, cool. I would totally be open to having him on. Absolutely. And I'm going to be talking at some point with Anna about this. I love you guys. Patreon.com/TMBS. Get your tickets to the Philly live show. Click the bell so you get the notifications. Spread the word on everything. 4,000 patrons, next goal. Let's get to 100,000 subs on YouTube. Thank you guys all so much. Much love.